What's up everybody, it's your boy Monte. Welcome back to Poker Vlog number 49. In today's episode, it is a highlight of our weekly game over at Outlaws up in Atascadero, California. It is also the first video that we got from our editor. Absolutely phenomenal job that they did on this video. They added all sorts of animations and helped me out with the editing process severely. There were little hiccups. It is the first time that it happened. It's to be expected. The commentary will address any of those mistakes that are made on the on-screen overlays. If you guys notice me missing anything, please throw it down in the comments below. That being said, before we jump into all the new people that are stopping by for the first time, I am currently a learning poker player trying to improve my game and skill set. I currently work full time and I just do this on the side once a week, trying to up that to 2 sessions a week while running this vlog. We're kind of documenting the journey of us going from an absolute new green player to, a profitable player and hopefully doing it full time in the near future. All right, with all that being said, we're ready to jump into it. Make sure to drop a comment on your favorite hand of the vlog. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this first hand of the vlog, we looked down at a 5-3 suited under the gun. We straddled for $6. We got 2 callers, and then surprisingly, the big blind folded here for $3. So when the action gets back to me, we have 1 of 2 choices. We can either just check it here or a raise. Considering there's only 2 players in the hand, and if we put in a raise here, they're both on the more aggressive side. It's very likely that one of them will 3-bet or just jam here since we just started playing and we're all only 300 deep. It is a 1-3 game, but this game on a weekly basis plays much deeper than that because it is a match stack. I don't want things to get crazy immediately in the first hand with 5-3 suited, so we just put in the check here. So 3 of us going to this board run out with $21 in the middle, and the board comes 6-10 queen with 2 diamonds. The small blind checks, I go ahead and check it. The button fires for 12. Then the small blind re-raises to 36. So obviously we're gonna put in the call here with our flush draw. I'm assuming it's going to be good a lot of the time. The button comes along for 36, 129 in the middle, and the 9 of hearts peels off on the turn. We do not improve, unfortunately. Small blind decides to size up here to a bet sizing of $75. I put in the call. Unfortunately, the button folds, so there's less money going into the middle, but that's quite all right. 279 in the middle. Hoping to peel a club because we don't have much else going on. And Johnny's a real one. He throws the jack of clubs out there on the river to make things even better. Our opponent announces all in. We snap call it. He says 2 pair. I show our flush and we are good. Always nice to start the vlog with a good win. Even better when you make your hand and your opponent puts the money in for you. 563 bones coming our way. All right, ladies and gentlemen, grab onto your seat because there's a suck out coming. We look down at ace king offsuit on the big blind. Under the gun, raised to 20. It's our good buddy Shelby. You guys know how aggressive he can be. The action gets over to the small blind, who decides to 3-bet up to $60. This is a pretty strong line coming from the small blind. I just take this as jacks plus or potentially ace king suited, but since we're holding ace king, that's not very likely. I don't want to just call here and let Shelby into the hand and have to worry about 2 players. So I go ahead and put in a min raise to 120. Looking at Andrew's stack, he only has 200 and some change left behind, so I expect him to just get it all in here, which he does indeed do for an additional 215. It's actually 275 for me to put in the call here, so 576 going to this run out versus pocket kings, and we get an ace immediately right off the bat. Turn another ace to put the nail in the coffin for our buddy. There's 1 king left in the deck, but that king would give me a higher full house, so he's drawing completely dead. We scoop another big pot and land a $300 profit. Sorry, Andrew. Sorry for the suck out, Andrew, but you got plenty of time to get it back. And I think that suck out deserves a bit of a guest hand here. Our boy Andrew gets involved into a big pot. There was an open 215 by Shelby, a re-raise 245 by Eric in the big blind, and then Andrew decided to make it 115. Got both of them to call. 361 in the middle, and the board comes out 7 queen jack rainbow. Andrew rips it for 352. It's about a pot size bet here. Both of his opponents tank for a while, but do eventually put in the fold. Shout out to my boy for getting a little bit of it back. And then to just be an absolute menace, Andrew shows his opponents a bluff. He had king 10 for the open-ended straight draw, but his king high bluff got through. Well played, sir. So for this next hand, I looked down at ace queen suited under the gun. I tried to raise it to 15, but didn't realize it was a $10 button straddle, so it ended up being just a call, and then the entire table called, which is an absolutely atrocious situation considering how strong our hand is. $60 in the middle, and we go to this run out multi-way. Board comes out 347. 7 with 1 club. Unfortunately, not much we can do here besides check. Shelby ends up putting in a bet for $25. We have another villain in the hijack that puts in the call. The big blind ends up putting in the call, and then I'm just gonna float once here just because of the amount of money that's in this pot here with 2 overcards and a backdoor flush draw. 160 in the middle, and we get the 5 of clubs, so we picked up some equity here. And I still don't want to bet, so we go ahead and check it through because there's going to be a lot of sets, 2 pairs, and straights on this board texture given the pre-flop action. The hijack decides to bet $80. I decide to put in the call here, and everybody else gets out of the way. So we're going heads up to the river with 320 in the middle, and it comes a 5 of diamonds. At this point, I think this card is a lot better for me than our opponent. Considering this is a tighter player, I don't expect her to bet the turn card without having a made hand, in which case that hand is most likely a straight. If she had a set, she would have come out firing a lot bigger on the flop to try to get people out of there. So at this point, I tell myself to fire a nice chunky over pot size bet somewhere around 350 or 400. But then I get inside my own head and think, well, what if she did play the set this way and she just boated up? I'm just going to be lighting money on fire. So I talk myself into checking instead, and then our opponent very quickly flips over 8-6 for the nut straight. Definitely could have stolen this pot, and it feels real bad to have left money on the table. At the end of the day, we didn't lose a ton, but I feel like stealing pots like these could be the difference between a winning and a losing session sometimes. So it's still important to try to take the ones that you can. All right, for this next hand, we have a PLO Bomb Pot. The number is a bit off. There's only $80 in the middle to start off these bomb pots because it's $10 per person. We look down at ace 9 5 6 with 2 spades. There's 2 clubs on the board, so we have absolutely nothing here besides just a pair of 6s. So we're obviously just going to check because we can't really make anything happen with this hand. The turn comes a 9. We now have 2 pair. The action checks over to Fadi, who decides to bet $50. It folds over to us, and when the action gets over to me, I don't really have much. 2 pairs rarely ever good here, but I decide to give some action because we've been running good today. And that's when Shelby decides to be a weenie bobini and raise it to 100. And I can't fold now because I already have 50 in there, so folding with 2 pair is just going to be stupid. So obviously we put in the call here. Shelby flips over his hand, and he has 7-10 queen 8, so he's got a wrap plus the flush draw. Fadi flips over his hand, and we weren't able to catch it on the screen, but it's a very similar hand to Shelby's. And then the river comes a jack of spades, which I think is going to counterfeit my 2 pair, but I flip over my cards and somehow I think we're good. Fadi also had a 9 in his hand, but we have an ace as a kicker, so it played and we end up scooping this pot somehow. This next hand, I look down at pocket aces in the hijack. I decide to make it $15 to go because nobody behind us has bet up to this point yet. Shelby folds, and then the button raises to $45. The action folds over to me, and now I have a decision. Do we call the 45 or do we 4-bet here? Considering nobody else is involved in the hand, us going for a 4-bet here is going to look super strong, and I don't expect Mike to be doing this with ace king when nobody called in between us, not even ace king suited. I feel like he would have just called the 15, so I'm expecting him to have jacks, queens, or kings here a lot of the time, maybe even pocket 10s. If he has kings, he's going to call this bet or jam. If he has anything smaller, he will most likely fold. Just given the history I have with this player, I'm very certain he's going to get away from it. So for those reasons, I just call the 45. We go heads up to a run out with $94 in the middle. The board comes out 9-10 jack rainbow. Our opponent re-raised this pre-flop, so I'm going to check it over to him, expecting him to continue the aggression. He does indeed decide to fire for 50. We very quickly put in the call, and now the 6 of spades comes on the turn. I go ahead and check it over to him one more time with the intention of check raising. At this point, based on our opponent's sizing, he could have a set here, but he would also be playing queens and kings in the same manner. Queens would be open-ended while also being above the board. Kings would be above the board with a gut shot to the straight. We're double blocking hands like ace king and ace queen, or even ace jack. So I throw those options out the window. At this point, I decide I'm gonna go for a jam. If he has a set, oh well, have all my money. But I think there's more combos of hands that we are ahead of versus hands we are behind of at the moment. So I go for the shove for 259 effective. Mikey snaps us off. 712 in the middle. The river comes a 5 of diamonds, and our hand is good good versus Mikey's pocket queens. For this next hand, we look down at A6 suited under the gun. I decide to call the $10 straddle. The small blind calls and the big blind surprisingly folds. That's when the button decides to bump it up an additional $35. Small blind puts in the call and the action gets back to me. I don't think I really have a choice here. $55 is a lot for A6 suited pre-flop, but considering the button and I are very deep and have well over 1,000 in our stack, and I'm closing the action, so there's no risk of being re-raised and having to fold, I think it's okay to call with a suited ace here. So we do just that. And get the money in. So we're going to this flop three ways, 138 in the middle, and the board comes out 10, 5, 8 rainbow. Not really too much going on for us, unfortunately. The button fires for $80, and then the big blind decides to shove over the top. Easy decision for us. We're letting it go. The button tanks for a few minutes and then lets it go as well. And that's when the big blind shows that C8 has now been bluffed for the second time in a sizable pot with nothing but an open ender. There's never a shortage of action here at Outlaws, ladies and gentlemen, and the only thing I'm trying to do now is get involved with a monster and catch somebody with their hand in the cookie jar. We shall see if that happens. For this next hand, there is a $14 straddle by yours truly on the button. The action gets over to the hijack, who decides to raise it to 28. When it gets back to me, I do not want to just flat here and let the blinds in for cheap, so I decide to 3-bet up to 50, trying to isolate. Only the hijack calls, so our plan worked. 104 in the middle, and we go heads up to this flop, which comes out 10, 3, 10. Considering we put in the 3-bet pre-flop, we're going to have a lot of pairs in this situation, or possibly ace king, so I think it makes sense for us to continue here, so I decide to fire out for 50. Our opponent pretty quickly puts in the call. King of spades comes on the turn, improving our hand to at least top pair. Our opponent checks it one more time, and there's 204 in the middle now. Considering the pre-flop action, I don't expect our opponent to have a lot of 10x in this spot. It is possible, but it would be at the bottom of his range, so I'm going to go for some value with our top pair here. I decide to bet $100 into 204. Doesn't take very long for our opponent to put in the call. Go off to this river, which brings us the jack of clubs. Not really sure what to do in this situation. If we're putting our opponent on 2 Broadway cards and we're currently holding king queen, we're losing to straights, we're losing to trips, we're losing to 2 pairs. We basically just have a bluff catcher at this point. The only hand that I really think that we're beating here is ace jack, and that wouldn't make sense unless it was specifically ace jack of spades. Our opponent decides to lead here for 175, and when the action gets back to me, I tank for a minute or two and had a lot of the same thoughts that I had just mentioned earlier, but for some reason, while we were in the middle of the hand, I thought about it for too long and convinced myself that our opponent was just trying to steal the pot, and talked myself into making a pretty bad call here. The hijack immediately flips over his cards and shows us queen 10 for flop trips, and my boy Connor did a great job of sending our butt to value down. For this next hand, we looked down at pocket aces once again. What we did to get blessed by aces, I don't know. There was a $15 open behind us. I raised to 30. My boy Shelby raised to 110. The action folded back around to me, and at this point I have a decision as to whether or not I want to re-raise or just flat call here. And then Shelby, as I was in the middle of making my decision, says the last time you tanked on me you had aces, which really threw me off and just made me nervous, so I very quickly put in the call. Probably could have gotten away with betting 225 or 250, but it is what it is now. 235 in the middle, and the board comes out 3 king 6. Since Shelby was the pre-flop aggressor, I check it over to him. He bets 100. We're obviously going nowhere with aces. An additional 200 in there now, making the total 435. And now we get a great, not so great turn card, the ace of clubs. I check and my opponent quickly checks back. Given the flop action, I found it very likely that Shelby was holding a king and that he was going to slow down on this ace. Not sure if we should have bet this card or not. Either way, we're going to this river, which brings us an 8 of clubs. I decide to get greedy here and go for all of it. Shelby pretty quickly puts in the fold. The pot was about 430 and he only had a little over 500 in his stack, which is why we jammed here. Honestly felt like I misplayed that though, but it's quite all right because we get another opportunity to play the aces. Made it 25 to go and got called on 2 spots. The button decides to jam for 114 here. It's our buddy Andrew yet again. Contemplated raising for a little bit, but decided to just put in the call to try and entice one of the players behind us to come along for the ride. Unfortunately, they both fold, so we're going to go heads up to this run out versus Andrew's pocket 10s with 283 in the middle. Board comes out 6-9 queen rainbow. Turn comes a 4 of hearts, and the river seals his fate with a 2 of spades. Running really good today. Can't even say we're doing anything special. 200 bones coming our way. For this next hand, we looked down at ace 10 suited in the cutoff. I decided to make it $18 to go. Small blind folds, big blind puts in the call. Under the gun comes along for the ride as well. 3 of us go into this flop with 55 in the middle, and the board runs out 6, 7, 9. We have a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw, so nothing much to see here, so we go ahead and check it. 3 of spades gives us a decent amount of equity here. To make things even better, under the gun starts building the pot for us. He makes it 30 to go. I just put in a flat call here, and then we go to this river, which comes a 4 of spades. 115 in the middle, and our opponent leans out for 70 bucks here. Absolutely great spot to be in when you're holding the nuts. Now at this point, I know that I'm going to raise, but the question is how much. The tricky part here is this board is very connected. There's 4 to a straight, 8-10 also makes a straight, and there's 3 to a flush. So I'm not sure what our opponent has here considering how small the turn bet sizing was, but then this large sizing on the river seems like he either has a strong hand, maybe like the straight, or potentially a botched heart draw. The missed flush isn't going to call regardless. So I decided to target the straight here, and I go with the sizing of 175. Our opponent snap calls, and unfortunately he shows queen 6 of spades. Oh no. We end up winning the hand, but unfortunately we left some money on the table there. Hard to put our opponent on the flush though. This next hand is a juicy one. The $6 button straddle is on. One player calls in between. The hijack decides to make it 25 bucks. When the action gets back to the button, it gets re-raised up to $65. I look down at pocket jacks and the big blind. I go back and forth between raising or just calling for a while, but do decide to raise to 200, try and get this heads up. Fortunately, the hijack calls, which means it's very likely that the button's going to call as well, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He decides to re-raise to 500 here. And at this point, I figure our pocket pair is behind, so I do end up letting it go. Player in the hijack goes all in for 514, and that's when the button shows pocket queen. So we made a phenomenal fold here. Going to this run out, 12-28 in the middle. Just these 2 players left. We don't know what the second villain is holding, unfortunately. And the board comes out 6 Jack King. Oh no, we would have flopped the set. 10 of hearts on the turn, 5 of clubs on the river. Their opponent isn't showing still, but it looks like they're running it twice. Second board comes ace of hearts, queen of spades, 10 of spades, 5 of hearts on the turn with 2 of spades on the river. The opponent mucks his hand. Queens hold on both boards, but it sucks to see that we would have won a big one. For this next hand, we looked down at pocket 7s under the gun. We had originally called the $6 button straddle. When everybody limped the $6 and it got back to the button, he decided to bump it up another 20 bucks. Obviously, we all put in the call, so there's 4 of us going to this flop with 104 in the middle, and the board runs out 9-8-4 with 2 spades. Everybody checked in the dark over to the button, who decided to continue here for $40. I expect him to be c-betting here his entire range, so I actually think this board is a lot better for us than it is for him, especially when we only limped in for 6 under the gun. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the call here with plans to continue on any other little cards or any spades. The remaining player folds, and we go heads up to this turn, which is a 5 of diamonds. Phenomenal card for us. It's a little card like we mentioned before, so we bet 110 and he tanks for a little bit but does eventually put in the call. And now the river is an ace of spades. The ace itself is a good card for him, but the fact that it is a spade is absolutely not. 6-7 makes a straight, which we are double blocking because we're holding 2 7s, and the front door flush got there, which is the most likely hand we'd play this way. So for all those reasons, I think we can go for a really big bet here. It's going to put our opponent in a very tough spot if he just has a single pair holding, or even 2 pair holding if he has something like ace-9. So we make it 350 to go and watch our opponent go into the blender. Thinks about this decision for quite some time, but does eventually put in the fold, and you gotta believe we had to show it this time. Don't typically like to show our hands, but I think it's good to show your bluffs every now and then. It's good for the game. For this next hand, we look down at King 10 offsuit in the small blind, decide to raise the $7 straddles up to 20 bucks. Shelby decides to repop it up to 50. 150. The button gets out of the way. We put in the call and go heads up to this flop. 107 in the middle and the board runs out Jack A6 rainbow. I check and Shelby decides to continue here for $40. All we have is king high here, but Shelby is going to c-bet most of his range after he took the pre-flop betting lead. So I'm gonna float one street here and see what he ends up doing on the turn and then decide what to do from there. So we call the $40 and we go to this turn, which comes a wonderful queen of spades. We hit our gut shot here and I check it over to him. He checks it back and then the river comes an inconsequential 8 of clubs. At this point, I'm okay with either taking the betting lead or just checking it one more time. We do have a pretty disguised straight considering it was a gut shot. If Shelby has a strong hand, there's no way he's going to just check this river through. And I'm not really sure how many bluffs he would have in this spot, but if he has a hand that he was just bluffing with, maybe like a pair of 9s or a pair of 10s. If we bet here, there's no way he's going to call with that hand. So at the time, I thought it was better for us to just check, let him bet his strong hands, and then we can go for the check raise, let him bluff with his weak hands, and then he's gonna fold regardless. So we do check this river and Shelby goes 150. I instantly throw 500 in there. He thinks it over for a minute or two, but does put in the call and we show our straight. Bit of an overbet there on the river. I was trying to go so large that it almost looked like a bluff and luckily we got paid. For this next hand, we look down at queen 10 offsuit and we end up calling the $20 button straddle. It's a bit wide, but considering most of the players are gone from the table right now, we're only playing 5-handed. I also know the button is quite an aggressive player, so I decided to come along for the ride. The big blind ends up putting in the call and just as expected, the button did put in a re-raise. He added an additional $35 to this hand. The big blind puts in the call and we're obviously not going to go anywhere when we're closing the action. 166 in the middle and the board runs out 7 deuce 10 with 2 spades. After the big blind checks, I assume he does not have a piece of this board, so I'm going to put a pretty good bet sizing out there to try and get him out of the way and get this heads up with the button. So I fire out 100 into a 166. The button calls and the big blind folds. 366 in the middle and a wonderful 10 of diamonds peels off on the turn. We definitely do not want to pump the brakes here in this spot. I continue for 225 and the button puts in the call. 816 in the middle now and we go to the 9 of clubs. This does not really change too much on this board here for us. We still have trips with pretty good kicker. There's 800 in the pot and I think our opponent has somewhere between 500 and 700. I'm not sure on the exact amount, or at least I wasn't at the time. So I just threw out a bet of 700, which I was pretty sure covered him. Thought it over for quite some time, but eventually after a few minutes, he does grab the chips and throws them in the middle. We show our 10 and our opponent flips over a 7, which is obviously no good in this situation. And we scoop an absolutely massive pot in our direction. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your seats. It's time for our favorite punting hand, ace jack, this time of the suited variety. I decided to open to $25. Shelby has moved down the table a bit and re-raises to 65. Fadi puts in the call for 65, and when the action gets back to me, we're going to put in the call with the hand as strong as this. 199 in the middle and the board comes out deuce queen 9 with 2 clubs. I check with malicious intentions. Shelby decides to bet 75. Fadi folds, and when the action gets back to me, I repop it to 200 here. I don't expect Shelby to fold for this amount, but it will give us some more options later in the hand. Shelby puts in the call, 599 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes the king of clubs. We took the aggression on the flop, so we're not going to slow down here on the turn. I decided to fire for $300. This should be an amount that hopefully Shelby comes along for. He puts in the call pretty quickly, 1199 in the middle, and we go to an inconsequential 6 of hearts on the river. I think it over for a little bit, trying to feign some weakness, and then I end up checking it over to my buddy Shelby, who luckily takes the bait and decides to fire here for $400. And before he even has a chance to put the chips down, I announce all in, covering him for another 800 or so. He thinks it over for a few minutes, but ultimately does make the correct choice and decides to fold. Look down at queen jack offsuit in the small blind. There's a $15 open, and while I typically fold for this amount in this position, we've been winning a lot tonight, so I'm trying to give the table some action, so we put in the call. 3 of us go into this flop, $48 in the middle, and the board comes out 8 jack 6. We have top pair here, but I'm just going to go ahead and check anyway, see what our opponents decide to do. Body Fadi puts in a bet of 25. The cutoff calls 25, and I can't go anywhere with top pair just yet. 123 in the middle, and the 6 of clubs peels off on the turn. I check, Fadi checks, and now the cutoff decides to take the betting lead for $75. I'm thinking he has the jack, but might potentially have us outkicked. I put in the call for 75, and Fadi put in the call for 75. 348 in the middle, and the queen of clubs peels off. All my kicker problems have now disappeared because we have a very disguised 2 pair, which is going to be hard for our opponents to see because there's already a pair on the board. So at this point, I think it's time for us to go for some value here. I go with the bet sizing of 350. Fadi ends up folding his hand, and then the cutoff thinks it over for a second, but then decides to slide all his chips in for less. We show our 2 pair, and he shows queen 6 for a flopped bottom pair, turn trips, and rivered full house. Dang, that one feels real bad. Luckily, we've been on a heater all night, so I don't mind giving some of it back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and we're gonna go ahead and close out the vlog with this hand. I forgot to take the B-roll from me cashing out, so here, I'll just throw it up on the screen. We ended up buying into the session for 1,000. We cashed out 37.25, so our total profit was $2,725 in less than 6 hours. Absolutely phenomenal session. It's actually our biggest profit to date in any cash game that we've ever played, or even tournament, to be honest. So very happy to be getting this one on the books. I felt like we played some solid poker tonight. It really helps when most of our bluffs did not get called, and when the villains put in money when you have either the nuts or effective nuts. But that's enough poker. We'll swap over to our quick outro and then cut you guys loose. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this week's vlog. It was quite different from our normal ones with all the animations and the pacing and all that, but overall I think it's better. There's some things we have to iron out, but they'll get better week over week as per usual. First off, thank you for everybody that's watching this on release. Second, if you live on the Central Coast, stop by at Outlaws tonight. We'll be there from 5 p.m. onwards playing the 1-3 match, the stack that you guys love to watch every single week. Don't miss out, it's a good time. Oh, and with that being said, in regards to the weekly videos, sorry we missed last week. I was having some very technical difficulties. My Adobe Premiere kept crashing. I wasn't able to get the video working the way I wanted to. I don't know if my computer just couldn't handle all the new animations or what was going on, but I was editing for like 5-6 days straight, quotation marks on the editing. I was fighting my Adobe for like 5-6 days straight and actually only editing for like a few hours out of, you know, that entire duration. The editors gave me a product that was like 70% complete, so I didn't really have to do that much editing. All I have to do is the voiceovers now. But yeah, for some reason my computer couldn't handle it. I think I ironed out all the kinks, so we're going to be back on schedule for next week, but just wanted to let you guys know I didn't forget about you, not lagging, don't know what the heck was going on with our Adobe. Anyhow, that's all the time that I want to take of yours. Thank you guys for stopping by. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all that fun jazz. I will see you all next week. Take care and good luck on the felt.